Okay. And then,
Yay.
oh yeah, more rolling in. Good morning. How are you all? I knew Stephanie Kellerman would be on here.
Love me some Stephanie.
I love you too, Linda. Of course I'm going to be on here. Are you kidding?
I love it. I knew that you would be. I love it.
Emily's listening in the background.
Oh, good. Hi, Emily.
Your hair looks great too, girl.
It does.
Thanks. Emily fixed it for me yesterday.
Yay. Go Emily. Everybody needs an Emily. Can Emily travel with Dana and I?
They really do need an Emily.
I think she probably would travel with you, Linda, occasionally. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds good. I need a trainer, a hairdresser, somebody to slap bad food out of my hand, all that good stuff.
All right, y'all. Thanks for being on. I feel like we should say welcome to Everything Life and Real Estate because we're used to recording the podcast. But we are going to make this an episode, but we thought we'd kind of kill two birds with one stone. Linda and I are in Chattahoochee, Georgia. We keep forgetting where we're at. Right outside of Atlanta at this really cool, what'd you call this?
It's like a farm.
Yeah.
But it's a hotel.
It's kind of like a bed and breakfast,
Kinda.
maybe.
Yeah.
It's called Serenbe, if anybody's ever heard of it. And it's nice. Adam and I took a walk this morning down and like saw a bunch of horses and donkeys and all kinds of stuff. But we've been here for the last couple of days for a roundtable with John Maxwell. And he brought to us Dan Cathy, who is the son of Truett Cathy, who founded Chick-fil-A. And so Dan is second generation. And actually now Dan has moved on to another big project we can talk about. And Dan's son, Andrew, is now, I guess, the CEO of Chick-fil-A or running Chick-fil-A. So third generation. So we got to spend time and they shared just, oh my gosh, I don't even know how many. We were just saying we took so many pages of notes. So we just wanted to share with you all some of the biggest takeaways that we had and a little bit about the experience. You want to kick off?
Sure. Yeah. There was so many. I mean, to be around somebody like, we were just talking about this earlier, you have to look at people and think, how much longer is it even an opportunity to be in front of people? I know sometimes, it gets hard to travel to one more place or the expense of one more, but just always asking yourself, how many people actually get to be around this person's brain and how much longer might they even be around to teach? And so we kind of try to gauge that. And then we also look at their businesses and say, who has a business that we would love to emulate and who doesn't want to emulate Chick-fil-A, right? It's like one of the best. Even if you don't like their chicken, I mean, you can't, deny the fact that their service is phenomenal and they can hire great people and things like that. So my very first thing that I took away was, how they say my pleasure? It actually took 10 years for that to catch on. And I think, sometimes we say to our team or our kids or whatever, hey, I want you to say yes, ma'am, or no, ma'am, or whatever, and they don't do it. Or, they want to say no problem. But the truth is, it took 10 years for that to actually catch on. Truett brought it to him after he had stayed at a Ritz-Carlton. And even with that, it still took 10 years. I thought that was huge because I think most of us would quit. I would certainly probably quit and say they're never going to save my pleasure.
Yeah, I was trying to find my notes on that too, because he said that he was always thinking 10 years down the road. And oh, here it is. Yeah, 10 years for Truett to get my pleasure out there. It took 10 years for Dan to get Backstage Stories out there, which is this Trilith Studios that they're working on right now in Georgia. But he said the lesson around that was when you hit resistance, just remember that it takes time and it takes consistency. And he said that Truett was just always so consistent with the my pleasure, and that was one of the biggest things.
Well, and I think sometimes I think we think of this a lot of times about Gary and different leaders. They actually, I've always said, when you go sit in front of Gary at the masterminds, the message pretty much is the same. He might change it up a little bit. And I think some people get bored with that. But I think the question we need to ask is if I've heard that so many times and it's such a truth that this leader is committed to it, then where is it showing up in my life? Instead of, I remember going when the 6 personal perspectives used to be in the front of every class that Gary ever taught. I would hear people say, "Oh my God, not the 6 personal perspectives again," and instead I think what we have to say is, I don't think there's a lot of new truths.
Yeah.
There are truths that are going to be true hundreds of years back and hundreds of years forward. And so I think when you find those, and I told Dana, I like to try to find the common themes between leaders. If they're telling me the same thing and they're all successful,
Yeah.
that's probably something I'm going to have to figure out or understand.
We should share. Okay. So we were talking about this yesterday. And we were kind of pointing out because I know Linda always looks for that. Like, what does John Maxwell do that Dan Cathy does, that Gary Keller does,
Dan Sullivan
that
does.
Dan Sullivan does? And a couple of the things that we noticed yesterday, let's see, what 2 are we talking about? Oh, well, one, we were talking about one thing that they all have in common that they do is they like John would say, walk slowly through the halls, but like they, what would you say? Like how he brought in each of those guys. Like, here's an example. We were walking around touring the place, and Dan Cathy would literally stop when he would see people walk by, and he would say, "Hold on, guys, come over here, introduce yourself. This is so-and-so and so-and-so. They're working on this project. Tell them a little bit about what you're doing. Tell them a little bit about yourself." And these were, young workers.
Yeah.
And then at the end, there were 2 guys working, and they had on these t-shirts that were like ministry t-shirts. And he said, "Hold on, come over here. Introduce yourself, tell them what you do." He said, "These are the guys that we partner with. They help us build all the tables," which, by the way, I don't know if you guys knew this. We did not know this, but when you go into a Chick-fil-A, there are community tables. And so he said, if you look for the community tables inside Chick-fil-A, there are these big kind of wooden tables. Well, these guys are the guys that make those tables, and they're all in recovery. They're all in a recovery program here in Georgia. And so Dan said, next time you're there, drop your napkin on purpose and get down on the ground and look up that under every community table is the guy who built its testimony and name that they've carved underneath the table. So I told Linda, I can't wait to go in Chick-fil-A and lay down on the ground and look and see what's underneath the tables. But he stopped those 2 guys, and one of them said, "I'm 18 months sober, and I'm working here for the Cathys has changed my life." And so one of the things we talked about that they all have in common is they really like edify everybody around them, no matter what their like role is or level is, or they take the time to stop, they edify them, like they let them share their story, appreciate them,
highlight them.
Yeah. I mean, in front of everybody, which is so great. And there was one other thing they did. Do you remember what it was that we were saying, him and John? Oh, I know what it was. They have great people around them all the time. Like when you are in John's world, and then we noticed this about Dan Cathy yesterday, every single person that was around them or that was on their staff, I mean, they all were just so articulate, so well-mannered, so grateful, so like smart, just very like with everything. And we were like, golly, they all have the best. Every person that's around them is just like the best. They were all there to make sure that we had the best time.
Yeah. Very much.
It was really good. Another takeaway that I know we both had, which was probably one of my greatest ones, was he talked about the second mile. And this was huge. A lot of people in the room loved this. He said a lot of times, and this is biblical. And I was trying to find if I wrote down the Bible verse and I can't find it. I'll have to find it. It was somewhere in Matthew, I think, but he was, did you see if you had that? He said, there's not a lot of competition in the second mile. And he said that a lot of times we're just trying to get in that first mile, and then we stop and we don't push past to go the second mile. And he said the unforgettables are in the second mile. And I thought that was huge. And so he even gave little examples with Chick-fil-A, like when they started with fake flowers in the vases on every table. Well, the second mile is they have fresh flowers in the vases on every table now. The first mile, old example, was they used to pass out those salt and pepper packets, or whatever. The second mile, unforgettable now, is someone walks around and says, would you like fresh cracked pepper?
Yeah. And I wrote down that's Matthew 5 verse 41, but I don't know if that's correct or not. I couldn't hear him completely, but I think it's somewhere in Matthew 5 verse 41 that he took that biblically.
He said, don't wait for something to be 100%.
Yes.
He said that a lot of people wait on that last 10% forever, meaning you might get your business or you might hit a goal or you might get to whatever he said, get to 85, 90% and then figure out how you can go the second mile.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people won't even start the second mile till they feel like they're 100% on the first, which means they never start the second mile. And he said, the minute it's 70 or whatever percent, go ahead and do the second mile.
Yeah, I love that. He also talked about the second mile was the respectful language. Like instead of, do you want a refill? It was, may I refill your beverage? Instead of saying thank you or no problem, it was my pleasure. And so he said, you can also go the second mile with respect in your vocabulary, your attitude, your demeanor. And I don't know if you guys feel like this, but you know, I looked at Adam and said, I feel like we've lost this in our society today so much. And it's just bringing it back. He said second mile behaviors, those leaders are conductors, meaning like they're always composing and he had like a little wand thing or conductors, whatever that's called, stick or I don't know. And they were, and he
Conductor
said,
stick.
yeah. And he said, when you are doing a second mile behavior, like you're always looking ahead, you're always conducting, and it could even be little things. But I just thought, gosh, that's so true. I really loved there's not a lot of competition in the second mile.
Yeah, so true. And I think something as simple as the vocabulary.
Yeah.
Most people think it's got to be something big, like a rock star type thing.
Yeah.
But just the simple things. I also noticed they kind of went back in history and looked for things that used to be that are no longer. I wrote that down too, to kind of go back and think about history. One of my favorites that he said was, Chick-fil-A is a leadership development company disguised as a restaurant.
I loved that. Yeah.
And you made a point about what you had just read about students from Chick-fil-A.
Oh yeah. I don't know if you guys knew this or not, but one of the questions I asked him was, when colleges are looking at applications for students now, when they see Chick-fil-A on their resume, that it's like a bonus. They're like bonusing points or, you know, whatever it is that colleges look at when they look at applications. And so I asked him if that was something that was like, you know, how did that make him feel? And also, was it something that was ever part of his vision? And he said, no, that's a natural consequence of them, a natural positive consequence of them just living out who they are. And he said they used to look to Procter & Gamble. Like Procter & Gamble used to be the one that when colleges saw someone had worked at Procter & Gamble, they were like, okay, wow, this is a great, you know, they've got some great experience. And now that's Chick-fil-A. And I just thought that part was really cool. He said with that too, that no matter what role you're in, your role is incredibly important in society today, no matter what you do. And just remembering that always. I thought that was a really good one too.
Yeah. My next one I wrote down was the importance of white space. I think we keep getting this same message. And I think we were talking about Sundays, downtime on Sundays.
Because they're closed on Sunday.
Yeah. But I think mainly just we don't give ourselves that white space. We just run. And the real creativity and the real ideas come when we give ourselves some white space. So I wrote that down, that where is the white space?
Yep.
Let's find it on our calendar. Let's make sure we have it blocked in. And then how do we want to spend it?
Yeah. I think that was because he was saying that his dad always worked. They were always doing something on Sundays. I can't remember that story, but
yeah, his dad's mom worked at a restaurant or something. And so his dad would have to do dishes on Sunday afternoon because his mom ran the restaurant. And he always said, I don't want my restaurant to be open on Sunday.
On Sunday. Yeah. Yep. And then he has like some Sabbath things in there too. Another thing, I don't know if you had this on your list, but he talked about great leaders take advantage of unexpected opportunities. And he said, great founders do this too. He said Truett, his dad, was great at looking at unexpected opportunities and then figuring out a way to take advantage of those. He said, so for example, this where we toured is called Trilith Studios. So it's the third now in the country largest studio place in the country. And for movies, right. So like Marvel and stuff is filming there now. We toured, I mean, it's huge. It's 1,000 acres of just like mind-blowing huge buildings. But he said that there was an opportunity because Pinewood Studios out of London wanted to come to the United States. And, you know, most of them are in California or New York. and they were looking for something different. And so they took advantage of the acreage that they had to build those studios to partner with Pinewood. And so he said it was a completely unexpected opportunity. And now today he said that their Marvel and Disney from Pinewood is 70% of the revenue that they're bringing in. And he said it was just a completely unexpected opportunity, but they had to be strategic and like recognize that. I just thought that that was
Well, and actually how it originally started was they had an empty hangar for one of their
Right.
planes. They had 2 planes or something, and they had an empty hangar where their plane used to be, and it was empty, and Pinewood approached them and said, could we use this hangar to film movies? And, I sat and thought about that, and I thought, how many people would actually parlay that into an opportunity? And I think what happened in that conversation was they said, look, we really need a place probably bigger than this, things like that. And that is what spurred him into doing that. Had his dad not told him to watch for those, take advantage of those unexpected opportunities, I thought that one was huge, because I thought, oh, I think I might have missed a few
Yeah.
unexpected opportunities along the way.
Yeah. Okay. What'd you have next?
What I have next is, we are all in business of designing environments for talent.
Oh yeah.
We
loved
are all
that.
environmentalists, meaning we have to be creating environments where talent want to be a part of it. And I think back to your point, the people that they had around them, they were all very young, very sharp.
Yeah.
And so that the environment that he's creating there actually attracted some of those people to it. And that's how he wound up working with Dan Cathy. So I think we have to ask ourselves, does our environment
Mhm.
really look enticing to young upcoming talent?
Yeah. I think one of the next biggest things that I had came from a quote that he said, and he said, little dreams stir no man's heart
Sure.
or woman's heart. And he said, but big dreams and ideas take people's breath away.
Yeah.
And Linda and I both, and Adam and Jimmy, last night at dinner, we were like, you can't help but leave there and think, gosh, you're just not thinking big enough.
Yeah.
I mean, he thinks so big on like just a total another level of bigness that like you can't even. I mean, I just told Linda today, I'm like, I just feel like I haven't even been thinking nearly as big. I mean, but I love that quote, little dreams stir no man's heart, big dreams, ideas take people's breath away. And so he said he's constantly thinking 10 years down the road. And we just did a podcast because Linda just got back from a strategic coach session with Dan Sullivan about how to have what was it?
How to have the best next decade.
Yeah. And then Dan basically said the same exact thing. He's always thinking 10 years down the road. And so he said, ask yourself the question, and I would challenge you guys to write this down. Where do you want to be in 2033? Like, how old are you going to be? How do you want to be personally, financially, with your health, with your business,
With your kids,
with your kid?
family.
Yeah. Anything else. And he gave the example of, he said before 2000, he said his dad never would let them say the B word, which was billion. And so he said that he just never, he said that they weren't allowed to say the B word. And so he said before the year 2000, they started really thinking about how they could be $1 billion business. And one thing I loved that they did was he said that they took inspiration trips to help them think bigger.
Yeah.
So they would go tour these bigger places
that were doing $1 billion.
Yes. And they would see like what their systems were, how they operated, even down to like what their facility looked like how did they have desks? Did they not have desks? Like what did everything look like? And because he said somebody is already doing it, they're out there. So what could your tomorrow look like today if you were thinking that somebody else is already doing what I want to do? I just have to go find them and figure it out.
Yeah. And one of the things that he said was just, being like, he would even go to like places that had nothing to do with his kind of business. Like he would go South by Southwest in Austin, Sundance, don't limit it to just ideas that are in your field or whatever. Find where the inspiration, he said, find where people who are influencing are sharing big ideas.
Yeah. Yeah. Love that.
Let's see, there was one. Okay, we talked about that one. Oh, one that I love, and I'd heard this before, and I always say it too, that I always say 4 of the most important decisions you'll ever make is who's your mate, who's your master.
Yes, I
and,
heard that down
and,
too.
and what's your mission. And then I always like to add, and who do you determine wealth for? Because if you
Yep.
determine wealth for somebody who doesn't help you get those things, then that doesn't do you any good.
Those were the 3 M's that
Yeah.
he said everybody needs to be thinking about. Yeah. Who's your master? Who's your mate? What's your mission?
Yeah.
And then Linda always adds, yeah, who do you determine wealth for? Those were great ones to write down.
Because I think the reason I added who you determine wealth for is sometimes we do that without any thought at all, not thinking it matters. Matter of fact, I was just talking to a recruit and she was complaining, she's at another company and she was complaining about her sales manager. And she said, I really don't need a sales manager. And after she finished, I said, you're absolutely right. You don't necessarily need a sales manager, but everybody needs leaders.
Yeah.
And, because leaders should inspire you to think bigger. Leaders should help you see your potential. Leaders should open opportunities, for you to do bigger things. Right. And so in her mind, she'd already just said, well, I don't even need that in my life. And I think that's kind of sad because that means we don't need anybody. And I think we all need somebody to help us succeed.
Yeah. Love that. People were asking him like, how does Dan Cathy get so inspired to think so much bigger? And what does it look like for people that are around him? And he talked about, I think it was Moorhead College. He talked about the 5 wells of a Moorhead man.
Oh, I wondered who that was. Who's the Moorhead man?
I don't know. Adam told me it was from a college. I think it
Okay.
must be, and I was like, Moorhead, Kentucky. And he's like, I doubt it. So I'm not sure. We'll have to look that one up. But he said the 5 wells of a Moorhead man. And I thought these were so good. He said, number 1 is they're well read.
Uh-huh.
Number 2 is they're well spoken. And he said that those first 2 go in that order because he said he believes in not opening your mouth without knowing. So well read and then well spoken. Number 3 was well dressed. Number 4 was well traveled. And number 5 was well balanced. And he said, actually, he felt like the most important that has been in his life for Dan was the well-traveled. He said that was the huge one because he said Dan always saw himself as a scout, and John loved that he used that word. Like
Love
John
that,
kept
yeah.
saying, like, you guys have to be thinking about how you can be a scout, meaning he said like he would always go and look at his competition. He would be in real time to see, oh, Morehouse. Thanks, Mike Green. Morehouse College in
College, okay.
Atlanta. I bet
it.
that's what it is. Okay. Yeah. That just shows you how fast we were trying to write down like every word that he was saying. Okay. Morehouse. That's it. Okay. Thanks, Mike. So he said that the well-traveled one was huge because he was always going around looking at his competition in real time, what's going on in the world out there. He said he would go to the most exciting business spaces and see what they were doing, like what was happening. And that was a big aha for Mike said, my pleasure. I love it. That was a big aha for me because even personally, I was thinking, gosh, sometimes I get so stuck in the day to day that like I haven't been out there scouting.
Well, I love that. Speaking of the day to day, this is what I was going to add a while ago. There was a meeting where Dan Cathy said all they were doing was talking about the minutia.
Yeah.
And
He kept saying the na stuff.
The na stuff that we all hate. And so I was thinking about that. I thought, well, whether we're in a meeting and it's going on or we're doing it ourselves, he said the immediate thing to do was he just stood up and gave a big goal.
Yeah.
Because the minute you have to point your eyes to a big goal,
Yeah.
you can't point down at the ground.
You're out of the na stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So I thought you could even do that personally when you catch yourself in the na stuff.
Yeah.
Immediately go write a big goal on the board or say, I'm going to accomplish something big, and then start focusing on how you're going to do that.
Yeah.
Because it takes your eyes off the crap on the bottom of the floor.
Yeah. I love that. I don't know about you all, but I feel like we all have days where we're all just in the crap on the bottom of the floor, which isn't a good place to be in. He said, when we stay in the small of things, the small world, we can get claustrophobic. And that's when you have to jump the fence and like think of that next big thing that you want to do. And that really resonated with me. I don't know if you guys have ever been in that space.
When I think jump the fence also meant get out of your own environment.
Totally.
Go someplace else. You said this yesterday or the day before. You said, I really needed this.
Yeah.
I needed to come and be here and do this. And I think sometimes instead of getting out of our environment, we just stay there and realize what we say. If I don't feel very good, or it's kind of feels yucky, or I feel stuck, where could I go and just maybe be around another energy and another environment that might change my own energy and my own environment.
Yeah. That's why I see some of you on here that I'm pushing to go to the summit in Charleston. That's why, because I know that if you can get in that environment,
Yes.
even if it's just for a day or 2 days, it's gonna completely, it just changes your mindset. It like whips you in a different thing. Another thing, this was, oh yeah, he said we get in the nah when we don't have any big ideas. That's why we can't get anything done. Like well, this was a political, he said, like in Washington right now and stuff, because so many people are like in the nah stuff. This was also just not as much a business, but a personal one. He said, just remember, and this was somewhere biblically too, it takes healthy people to help the sick.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so he said,
Wow.
if you're healthy right now, like that means God's calling you and he's already blessed you. So you need to go out and have the big ideas, because if you're a healthy person, like it's your responsibility to go help other people and to help people even. And I was like, man, that is so true.
Mhm.
That's such a good one. Like even on the days that you don't feel like it, think about that.
Well, and I think too, with him, we can look at what he's doing and we could both go, oh my gosh, that's so big. We're not thinking big enough.
It's untouchable.
But
Yeah.
he's actually catapulting past success into something bigger.
Yeah.
So it may look like a huge jump from where we're sitting, but when you have been successfully building something, there is a next bigger thing.
Yeah.
That from where you're sitting doesn't look as big as the rest of the world sees it. So I think it was easier for him to do something to the scale that he's doing it because of the success of Chick-fil-A. So I think we have to be careful and not say, well, gosh, there's no way I can go add light to the Hollywood scene,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
No, but there is a next thing that you could bring light to. That's a next natural step from your current success.
Yeah.
And I think that was the whole goal of the Trilith, is to bring light into the darkness of Hollywood.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of cool because their thoughts were Hollywood is shaping the minds of our children and all of us with the movies that they make. So if we can, make sure that there is, some Christian beliefs and Christian people in that mix and add light to some of the darkness, maybe we can help in that area instead of just sit back and say, well, that's them and this is us.
Well, that's okay. This is kind of a spiritual thing. So if you're not into that, you can think about it in a different way. But he said on a spiritual thing, he said, you have to sometimes check your personal preferences for the sake of having a relationship and being
that's
able to influence others. And I was like, man, that is so good, because he said sometimes Christians are bad about just going and hanging out with a bunch of other Christians. And he said, really, like, that's not what we were called here to do. Yeah. And John Maxwell said, they'll never know our God until they like us first.
Mhm.
And so he said, like, that's why you have to go out and build relationships. And that's basically what Dan Cathy, tries to do does do with the community of Chick-fil-A and now with the community of Trilith. And I was thinking, like, man, that's so good. Even if we looked at our offices like that, or our teams like that, or our businesses like that, there was just so many great nuggets around that. Okay. Did you have something next?
Well, I wrote down something that I didn't even realize is a restaurant means a place of restoration.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
And I'd never really thought about, a restaurant, you think of something just serves food,
Yeah.
but the truth is, if you think about a place of restoration, you're going to design it differently. And he said it took 2 years of creating the right vocabulary and getting the right people who
Yeah.
would think like that. I did ask him a question because they do have to sell to franchisees. I asked him, how do they keep those standards, and in their agreement, they can get out of business with somebody in 30 days notice
On either side.
on either side. I thought, wow, that says a lot, right?
He talked, I know a lot of you have worked so much on creating experiences for your businesses. And I loved part of the thing he kind of shared. Another one of his guys came up and talked about Walt Disney,
Oh.
which they've modeled a lot of their Chick-fil-A kind of standards and visions off of Walt Disney. And he said, with Walt, the vision of Disney was so big and Walt was so innovative. He was looking at experiences that people weren't even thinking of yet. So the whole reason, and you guys may already know this, but I didn't know it to this depth. The whole purpose of him creating Disneyland is because he wanted to create an experience of putting people inside of the movies that they were watching all the time. So that he was thinking so far ahead with how do I create a great experience for these people, which is really what made Disneyland come to fruition. I haven't read this, but I did already order it from Amazon. He said the book, The Experience Economy by Jim Gilmore. Had you read that?
I've seen it years ago. I don't think I ever read it.
Yeah, I haven't read that, but I ordered it. But Dan said that was one of the books that shaped him the most when it comes to creating experiences. But he gave the example of, he said there's a thing called a loyalty triangle. So if you draw a triangle at the bottom, you have like your first time triers. And then you have different levels in the middle, but at the very top, you have what he calls the zealous. And those are like your raving fans. And so he said that really you don't need to work your business or create experiences based off of the bottom level. You need to start at the top. And so he said, pay attention to the zealous, the ones that are the raving fans the very most, because they will trickle down to everybody else. And so he gave the example of Dan had the idea of doing backstage tours at Chick-fil-A. And I thought this was so freaking smart. He said that they would go up to random customers and basically say, hey, have you ever been back? Like, have you ever seen the backstage of Chick-fil-A? And they would say no. And he would say, well, this is your lucky day. And so they would have them. What did he say? Crap, I forgot. He said, the stoves are hot, the knives are sharp,
and the floors are slick.
And the floors are slick. Yeah. And he said, repeat after me those three things, like the knives are sharp, the stoves are hot, and the floors are slick. And he said, after they would say that, they would say, okay, come put these gloves on and come on back. And he said he would give them like a tour of the back, because he said it was a tweetable, TikTokable, whatever experience, big time. And then he said on the flip side of that, it also kept the kitchens clean.
Yeah.
Because he said that the staff, everybody was like, man, we don't ever know when he's going to bring people through. So it elevated the whole backstage, the back part of the staff. But then it also gave an experience to the people and made them raving fans. So he said, write down the question, what's an experience that we could design for our business?
Well, and it also gave accolades to that chef. I mean, they're in the back side of the restaurant. They never get recognized or anything else. So it kind of gave them a little bit of notoriety also.
Yeah, I thought that was
really cool.
So cool. I know it left me thinking.
He also said on the raving fans, you don't have to, it doesn't have to be free. He talked about how he pays a lot of money to be in the top tier of people for Disney.
Yeah.
So you think about your raving fans, have to do everything for free, but he said you actually could charge for
the experience
with raving fans.
Because he said, I'm a raving fan of Disney and I do the 10 by 10. I don't remember what he called, but I think it's like 30 grand a year or something like that. And he said, so I'm actually paying to be a raving fan to get the experience to go back out and have it trickle down to talk about how much I love Disney. So we were like, yeah, that was a really good aha. Let's see, what else did you have? We had so many.
He said one of the things that they realized is they had a 98% retention rate.
Yeah.
So
when
they realized that, then that meant they could pour more money and time back into their people because they stay. Whereas a lot of times, he said at restaurants, people don't want to pour into their people because they're like out the back door.
Yeah.
So I thought, wow, I don't even know if we would have ever figured out what is something that we're doing extremely well that we could pour more into instead of trying to find something new to do.
Yeah. Love that. Oh, I know this was just a little nugget, but he said when he was talking about the experience, he said, truly thinking about how you can create something that's remarkable or how you can be remarkable to somebody, because he said, if somebody comes to you and says, oh, that's neat, just know that neat is not remarkable.
Right. Yeah.
And so he said, like, how could you constantly be thinking, which we would all probably know that as like the good to great.
Yeah.
Which I love what he said, Chick-fil-A is where good meets gracious instead of great, which I thought was really, really good.
The thing he said too is chicken is just chicken.
Yeah.
So how we knew that how we serve people was going to be the differentiator.
Yeah.
How we're going to be different.
Yeah.
Because chicken is chicken. You can't do a whole lot to make your chicken too different.
Yeah. I took another thing he said, actually John said this. He said the speed of the vision comes faster with dollars. And so where I took that as is like sometimes if you are, either like, well, it comes in two different ways. Some people will say, I'm making enough money, like I don't need to make any more money. And then other people would say, like, no, I want to make a lot more money. But I just love that he said the speed of the vision comes faster with dollars. What that told me is like, that's sometimes on the days, maybe if you're like, gosh, why am I doing all this? Like really thinking about the more dollars that you have, the faster you can get to your
Yes.
vision, or the
Yes.
faster you can get somewhere. Like you can get there with grit, but you can get there faster with you. You're going to get there with or without it if you have the grit, but the money just makes it go faster. And I was like, man, that's really, really good to think about. He said it's the vision first. It's not even a skill. Like you have to start with the vision and the intentionality. He was so intentional too. We didn't even talk about that. He would take us on these tours around Trilith, and like he showed us the dirt where they were getting ready to plant these like raised flower beds. And he said just yesterday, this is Dan Kathy, by the way, I was just out here walking and I saw that the dirt was all flat. And I went to the landscape guys and said, did you know that if you want to have these flowers that are going to, bloom and be these huge things like we want an experience when they come in, you have to have a foot of raised dirt on top of the Georgia red clay, and it has to be this and this and this. And he said, so I had them rip out and redo all of the like beds before they were going to put them in. And then he walked us over and he said, and like these cobblestones, we had these cobblestones put in on the road, but now I've realized that it's women who wear heels can't walk on them, or people can't ride their scooters on them. So like, we're not doing these cobblestones in the next phase. Like he
Very
was so intentional. Oh my gosh, with every little thing about the community. But you could tell that he had such passion around it. And so I was thinking, like, when you're really passionate about something, you want to be intentional. Like you notice every little thing.
Well, and I think too, when you think about who he's trying to appeal to, those people are looking for a way for it to only be about the money for Dan Kathy.
Yeah.
Because in their mind, that's what it is. So if you're going to put organic beds, which he did,
Yeah.
he needed that to be proof to them that they were going to have the kind of community that was important to them, that spurred their creativity.
Yeah.
So even the little thing, like if he had not used organic stuff, if he had not made it beautiful, aesthetic to the eye, somebody could look up and lose trust in
Yeah.
what the whole community was about. That's what I got out of it, was that's a little thing, but it's those little things that add up to whether that community is going to trust he's in it for the right reasons or he's in it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, we asked him in the community where we asked one of his worker guys that was there. We asked him, like, in this whole Trilith community, they're building houses, people live there. I mean, it's a whole community, and we couldn't believe why there wasn't a Chick-fil-A inside of there, of all the places.
Yeah.
There's restaurants everywhere, and we were like, why is there not a Chick-fil-A? And Austin, the guy that works for Dan, said because Dan doesn't want it to seem like that
Self-serving.
this is self-serving for them, for Chick-fil-A. So he's not going to put one here. And we were like, gosh, that's so smart. So good. So good.
Yeah.
Probably one of the last things, gosh, there's so much more, but one of the last things I had came from John, and he said, just don't forget, like, no matter how inspired you can be when you come to these things, or when you listen to stuff like this, or you're learning this, he said, just remember that everything has to be applied. And so you have to actually take the time to go back and look through your stuff. He said, reflect immediately when your thoughts are fresh. So I can't wait to do that on our 5-hour drive home today, because I want to really go through and reflect on this stuff. I know you'll probably do it on the plane. But he said, just remember, like, everything has to be applied. You can't just be inspired with stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was fantastic.
Any last thing, Linda, that you had?
No, I think one of the things that he said was, that I picked up on was look for things that are lost. So many of us grew up with grandparents or whatever that told us to be kind, be polite, have manners, and look for the things that are lost. I noticed this about Johnny Morris too.
Johnny Morris, tell him who
Johnny Morris owns Bass Pro and Cabela's. And I think Johnny Morris and Dan Kathy have a lot in common. They grew up probably very similar, probably going to church every Sunday, learning to have manners. Like Dan Kathy on every elevator, when
Oh,
when
yeah.
a woman came in, he took off his hat. And he
He-
said, I try to teach other people, when a woman enters the room, take off your hat.
Well, he said that one time he was with his dad and he said, I was just, I think he said he was 12 years old,
Yeah.
11 or 12 years old. And he said that him and his dad were on an elevator and a lady got on the elevator and Dan said, I had a beanie on, like a
Yeah.
toboggan. And he said the elevator doors opened and she got off, but we were still on. And he said, as soon as she stepped off and the doors closed, my dad looked at me and said, don't you know that when a woman enters the room, you should always take your hat off? And Dan said, I said, no, sir, I didn't know that, but now I do. And he said, and I've never, not done that since then. But that was just like little things like that were so great.
Yeah. So I thought about it with Johnny Morris too, because when you go to Branson, Missouri, it's very old. You kind of feel like you're going back in time a little bit and to some of it, to where it's all about families. They don't do a lot of gambling or alcohol or any of those things. There are some, but it's not the focal point.
Yeah.
And what the focal point is, what can families and extended families do? So I thought it was kind of interesting. I feel like both of these guys have gone back in time and looked for what we've lost. I think he said we've lost simility.
I can't
I
remember.
don't remember what the word was, but he said we've lost simility. So I think thinking about that, instead of just being okay that we don't do it anymore, how do we go back and bring some of those things back into our organization? And realize, because I remember as a kid growing up, my dad would slap you across the face if you didn't say, yes, ma'am,
Yeah.
no, ma'am, no, sir, yes, sir. I mean, really, you felt that obligation to be respectful of
Mhm.
your elders, right?
What do you always say? You said this before, like the guardrails get a little bit widened.
Yeah, our boundaries just keep going out farther and farther.
Uh-huh.
And we're in such a me society right now that we've got to figure out how to get back to we.
Yeah.
I mean, all the kids today seem like they're growing up thinking, me and selfies and what do I want and all that stuff. And so how do we get some of that back that we've lost? And I think Dan Cathy's doing it. I think also Johnny Morris is doing it too.
Yeah.
And I think we're all a little bit hungry for that.
Yeah, he did say that. I had that in my notes that we have to have, like, we have to go from a me community to a we community, but with the boundaries and the guardrails that are, how they used to be, kind of like we've just gotten so far away from that it's like the new normal. And that was one of the things I loved and respect the most about him, is how they live that out. They don't care. I mean, kind of Linda brought this up yesterday, kind of like Hobby Lobby. Like they don't care that they're not open on Sundays, and they've had a lot going on around it, and they've pushed through it, but it's what they believe in and it's their beliefs, and they're not gonna sway from it. So it felt good to see bigger people doing that and living that out, and knowing that, if they can do it, we can do it too.
Yeah, I think he said affirm your role in society, and I think that's what he means.
Yeah.
Whatever your role is, stand with it. Don't back down off of it, even if you feel the pressure.
Yeah.
To back down off of it.
Yeah. Love it. All right, guys. I think those are the big things. Before we jump off, any questions? Anybody have any questions while we're on here? Not, that's totally okay too. All right. Well, thanks for being on and listening. We appreciate it. And we'll be dropping this as a podcast episode also, so you can go back and listen, and I'll work to put together a PDF of the notes. I usually do that to email out anyway. So we'll get that out to everybody too.
Awesome.
Can I
Have a
ask
good
a
day,
question?
everybody.
Oh yeah, sure, Kathy.
So like, what was the setup of the forum or whatever it was? Like, who was there? I wasn't exactly sure. So I thought like it was Dan and John. Were there other people, or how was that?
Yeah. How many do you think there was? 20 people?
Yeah, he usually limits the roundtables to about 20 people. So John is always like kind of the main, and he introduces and brings in his guests, which was Dan Cathy this time. But Dan did introduce us to some of his staff and some people that played really intricate like roles inside of Chick-fil-A and inside of his Trilith project. And so we got to hear a little bit from them too, but I would say 75% of the time it was John and Dan Cathy.
Yeah. And most of the other people around the round table were like other business leaders that are there to try to, do the same thing we're doing, bring back to our people the ideas and the things that they've learned. There was a guy there that wrote, that Dana and I are going to have on the podcast, that wrote a book called The Talk. And actually he said the way that the book came about was his son came to him one day and said, when are you going to have the talk with me? And he goes, the talk? And he goes, yeah, about money, And so he wrote a book. It's kind of cool. I've kind of looked through it a little bit last night, but it's kind of a book that you can use with young people to talk about money and to help them have a better foundation of money. And, and I think the farther we get away from people actually having cash in their hand and understanding you either give up your cash and trade it for that thing,
Yeah.
and now it's just a card you slide. And now in this community, there was a place where you don't even have to have your card. You have an app and you walk in the store.
Their grocery store
And you
in
walk out-
Trilith is like that.
So anyway, this guy, his book is called The Talk, and it's how to have the talk with kids about money. So I thought that was kind of cool. And then the coach from UK has a book called Winning Tools.
Yeah, Stephanie, it was Matt Mitchell, the women's coach at UK. He was there this time. And so we're going to have him on the podcast too, but he just wrote a new book.
Oh,
So
that's awesome. His health
Yeah.
journey is crazy too.
totally
Is what?
health journey.
Oh yeah. He didn't talk about that very
He
much.
didn't talk about
But
that.
there are also a lot of pastors there.
He was
John-
just there as an attendee.
Yeah,
So we
he's
didn't,
there's-
we
yeah,
just
he
met
was-
him.
So usually it's business entrepreneurs or pastors that come to these roundtables, and they have them all the time. Like they've had it with the one I really am sad I missed is Nito Cobain.
Oh, I know.
I love
yeah.
Nito Cobain. I've always read his books and I've always loved his journey and what he's doing at High Point University. And
Yeah, I would love to go to him.
yeah, that one we missed, but I bet he'll do that one again. So just great opportunities to be around some amazing people.
Yeah.
Thanks.
You're welcome. I should say my pleasure. All right, you all have a great rest of your week. Thanks for being on.
Bye everyone.
See ya.
Have a great week.